Hi, welcome to this video which I'm going to be giving a psychological analysis of Josef Fritzl. Josef Fritzl of Austria is the man who held his own daughter captive for 24 years and fathered several children to her. In 2008, Elisabeth Fritzl made her escape and reported to police that her father had been holding her captive. She reported that he had repeatedly sexually abused and raped her. She'd been imprisoned in a small cellar beneath the family home, and during her captivity, Fritzl fathered a total of 7 children with his daughter. 3 of the children remained in captivity with their mother in the cellar. One baby had died a few days after being born, and the remaining 3 children were brought up by Josef and his wife Rosemary. Josef had told everybody that Elisabeth had abandoned the 3 children and the couple had lovingly taken over their care. Josef Fritzl married 17-year-old Rosemary when he was just 21 years old. The couple had a total of 7 children, consisting of 2 sons and 5 daughters. Elisabeth Fritzl was born in 1966 and her father reportedly began to abuse her in 1977 when she was just 11 years old. After completing compulsory education at age 15, Elisabeth started a course to become a waitress in January of 1983. She ran away from home and went into hiding in Vienna with a friend from work. She was found by the police within 3 weeks and returned home to her parents. She rejoined her waitress course and finished in mid-1984 and was offered a job in nearby Linz. Like many victims, she didn't speak up about the abuse that she'd experienced. It's clear that she wanted to remove herself from the family home to escape any further abuse. She was reported missing by the family and was tracked down and forced to return home. Josef Fritzl had previously broken into the home of a young nurse while her husband was away. He'd taken a knife with him and he'd held it to her throat while he raped her. He threatened to kill the nurse if she screamed. It was also reported that he was a suspect in the rape of a 21-year-old woman, and this is obviously an individual who is at ease using violence towards women. He saw young women as something to be controlled and manipulated. He felt that he could take whatever he wanted from women and he didn't show them any empathy towards them. He was known to have indecently exposed himself on a number of occasions. Josef Fritzl was arrested and charged with the rape of the nurse and received an 18-month jail sentence, of which he served 12 of them. In Austrian law, a criminal record can be removed after 15 years. As a result of this, when he applied to adopt his grandchildren 25 years later, that offence was never highlighted. On the 28th of August 1984, after Elisabeth had turned 18, Josef Fritzl lured her to the basement of the family home, saying that he needed her help carrying her door. And that was the last piece that Josef Fritzl needed to seal what would turn into the chamber where Elisabeth was being held captive. After Elisabeth held the door in place while Fritzl fixed it into the frame, he held an ether-soaked towel on his daughter's face until she was unconscious, and then he threw her into the chamber. And this shows the level of callous manipulation that he was entirely capable of. He knew that his daughter could legally leave the family home at the age of 18. And before that had happened, Josef had spent months preparing to detain her by fitting out the cellar. He knew that he needed an excuse to get her near the entrance, so that he tricked her into fixing the door. And these actions show that he had a full level of awareness of what he was doing. He'd planned it quite meticulously. And this is very controlling behaviour. It's impossible to say whether or not he intended to keep her imprisoned indefinitely. It may be possible that he just wanted to control her until she did as she was told. From that point of view, he may have felt that he was showing how much he loved her by protecting her from the outside world. Once Rosemary realised that Elisabeth was missing, she reported it to the police and filed a missing persons report. During that time, Josef would take himself to the cellar each day to tend to the needs of his daughter. Almost a month after her disappearance, Josef Fritzl handed over a letter to the police. He'd forced his daughter to write the note while she was imprisoned. And this letter stated that Elisabeth was tired of living with her family and she was staying with a friend. She didn't want her parents to come and look for her and that she would leave the country. Josef Fritzl told police that she'd most likely joined a religious cult. Again, this shows the level of cold manipulation that he was capable of. He was successfully deceiving his wife, his children, and the police. Throughout her 24-year imprisonment, Josef visited Elisabeth in the cellar at least 3 times a week to take supplies. During these visits, he would often rape his daughter. In doing so, it shows that he saw Elisabeth as a vehicle to be used for his pleasures. He was keeping her captive and he was able to access her and use her whenever he felt like. Josef's sister-in-law had said that he would go to the cellar every morning at 9 a.m. and he said that he was drawing plans for his machines that he sold on to do his business. He'd sometimes stay the night, and obviously he was very protective of the space and he would never allow anybody near it. A tenant had reportedly said that he heard noises from the basement, which Josef explained as faulty pipes. The captive family had a television, radio and cassette player to entertain them. And as more children were born, Josef forced Elisabeth and her children to dig out more space with their bare hands to accommodate them all. He'd often threaten Elisabeth and her children and control them by doing so. He told them that if they tried to escape, that he would gas them. He also told them that should they try to escape, the door would become electrified and would kill them. He'd also turn all of the lights out or refuse to deliver food for days as a punishment whenever they did anything that he didn't like. After her escape, Elisabeth told the police that Josef Fritzl often raped her and forced her to watch pornographic videos. He'd made her reenact them with her in front of the children in order to humiliate her. It shows that he saw Elisabeth and the children as somewhat less than human in some way. And in doing this, he was controlling Elisabeth and taking away any form of self-worth. And this type of behaviour is often seen in cases of domestic abuse. The perpetrator works constantly to undermine the victim and constantly eats away at their self-worth. They use threats and manipulation to get the victim to do what they want them to do. And the victims become so afraid and feel so unworthy that they just become compliant over time. However, Elisabeth showed a great deal of resilience and never gave up hope of finding a way out. In 2008, Elisabeth's eldest daughter became seriously ill and she begged her father to take her to get medical attention. Her daughter had been taken to hospital by ambulance and was admitted with a serious life-threatening kidney failure condition. Fritzl arrived at the hospital claiming to have found a note which was written by Elisabeth. Of course, the medical staff reported the matter to the police, who opened the case file on her disappearance. Fritzl repeated his story about Elisabeth being involved in some sort of religious cult and presented what he claimed was the most recent letter. The police contacted an expert on cults who raised doubts about the existence of the group that Fritzl had described. He noted that Elisabeth's letters seemed dictated and oddly written. Elisabeth pleaded with her father to be taken to the hospital with her daughter, and surprisingly, he agreed. And this was the first time during captivity that he showed any evidence of compassion towards her. He took her to the hospital, where they were both then detained by the police for questioning. After receiving assurances that she'd never have to see her father again, Elisabeth told the police a harrowing story. And after his arrest, Josef Fritzl knew that the secret world that he'd created for himself no longer existed. He cooperated with the police and he told them how to enter the basement. Initially, Fritzl had claimed that his behaviour towards his daughter didn't constitute rape, but it was in fact consensual, he said. He said that he always knew during the whole 24 years that what he was doing wasn't right, and that he must have been crazy to do such a thing and to think that he could get away with it. Yet it became a normal occurrence to lead a second life in the basement of his house. Fritzl reportedly said that he was not the beast that the media had portrayed. He said that he would take Elisabeth flowers and he took the children books and toys. He said that how he would watch videos with the children and eat meals with them. And in saying this, he's attempting to justify his behaviour. What he's basically saying is, I'm not that bad. I was acting just like a loving family member and I provided for them. He said that he'd imprisoned her because she didn't adhere to the rules anymore, and he suggested that his upbringing during the Nazi era had influenced the ideas of discipline and decency. He told police that his mother was very strict and used to beat him. He said how she had never shown him any love towards him, and he constantly lived in fear of her. This suggested that he sees himself as a victim, helplessly propelled along in his actions. And the underlying narrative of this is that he couldn't help what he'd done, and it was somehow not his fault, but the fault of his upbringing. He admitted that he'd planned to lock his daughter up while he was imprisoned for rape, so that he could express what he called his evil side. Josef Fritzl said, and I quote, "I was born to rape and I held myself back for a relatively long time. I could have behaved a lot worse than locking my daughter up." And again, he's trying to justify his own behaviour by saying that he's not that bad and that he could have been worse. And this shows that he doesn't take responsibility for his actions. The psychiatrist diagnosed Josef Fritzl as having a severe combined personality disorder, which included borderline schizotypical and schizoid personalities and a sexual disorder, and recommended that Fritzl receive psychiatric care for the rest of his life. I do hope that you found this short psychological analysis of Josef Fritzl informative and interesting. You can subscribe to the channel as I give psychological analysis on a number of different offenders. You can visit the website, which has a number of free resources and blog. I do hope that you've enjoyed the video, and I do hope that you've learned it. Thanks for watching.